afternoon, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed your lunch. My job to keep you awake. And thank you, John, for that kind introduction and, of course, for the invite to come here. I do chair, in fact, both RUMA and EP RUMA, RUMA being the Responsible Use of Medicines Alliance in Agriculture, and also EP RUMA, as John mentioned. And I do also play a part in Copa Cogeca as Vice Chairman of the Animal Welfare Group there. If I press I've already got the first slide up. So let's start with what is RUMA, who is it, what does it do? And really it's about raising awareness and building common understanding and communication across all parties concerned with the responsible use of medicines. Antibiotic resistance is seen as one of the biggest threats facing modern society, and certainly in the UK, dire warnings about the post-antibiotic age are never far from newspaper headlines. The One Health concept becomes so clear when, if I can get it up, there we are. The One Health concept becomes so clear and important when we discuss this. The One Health initiative, which is the drive and focus behind a lot of human and animal health issues, recognizing that human health, animal health, and ecosystem health are inextricably linked. And antibiotic resistance is a clinical reality in human healthcare, and the UK's Chief Medical Officer has stated on many occasions that approximately 25,000 people die in Europe as a direct result of antibiotic resistance infection each year. And that translates into healthcare costs and productivity losses of €1.5 billion annually in the EU. And veterinary medicine has a role to play in all of this, although in fact increasing scientific evidence suggests that the clinical issues with antibiotic resistance that we face in human medicine are primarily the result of antibiotic use in people and not in animals. But regulators and politicians are in a power struggle with global pharmaceutical companies which are based outside the EU, largely, and farmers are certainly in the middle of this struggle. And we see countries such as Finland and Sweden wanting tougher legislation in Brussels. And you have to wonder sometimes whether that in fact is about competition, making everyone else adopt their regime for a more level playing field. And when you then look at Spain, for instance, or Italy, down on the Mediterranean, producing huge amounts of food, quite intensive systems, and the challenges of hot climate and stocking densities is so vastly different to Scandinavia, with its isolated units or more isolated units, lower stocking rates, and of course, much colder climate. And the NGOs and power and pressure groups are on this bandwagon as well, as always, and making their voice heard very loudly. So we do have a challenge, but many of the NGOs support small farms, forgetting that increased legislation very often drives consolidation. Politicians and regulators need new medicines, but want to regulate their use. They offer little or no chance for profit, and therefore pharmaceutical companies are holding back. They are now offering slightly better terms, but I'm not sure that it's enough, and that negotiation is ongoing. So too much money really is spent on defensive R&D, addressing regulation, and not enough on innovative R&D. But regulators still want more, and in the form now of environmental assessments on new medicines and new products. And this can only lead really to higher prices and little innovation and development of medicines. However, the present model of producing as much medicine as possible to recoup investment and make a profit before the patent runs out, only then to have a shed lot more produced, cheaper generic medicines, is not a good model either, not when it comes to resistance. But change has certainly arrived, and for pharmaceutical companies and for us as farmers and everyone in the health industry, doing nothing is not an option. When you look outside Europe, at the developing world, it is of course a very different story. In some developing countries where the infrastructure is just not there, you buy antibiotics along with your can of Coke or your snack from the store. And if you take Asia and China, 5 billion meals a day. They eat a huge quantity of fish. Yet according to experts, the aquaculture practice in Asia is largely unregulated. It is really big. It's bigger than the captive or traditional fishing industry now, and a major source of protein for the diet. How much antibiotic is used is unknown, resistance is unknown, and there's nobody collecting the data. But coming back to this country, the UK Chief Medical Officer recently stated that the antibiotic resistance is in the same box as terrorism. Now, in fact, she is wrong there for sure. It is very serious, but it's not in that box. But I'll tell you what is: food security. We've heard it mentioned this morning. We should all remember that. If you look at the urban and rural population in major regions, these slides show the number of people, projected numbers, living in rural areas in green and in urban areas in red, in different parts of the world. And the grey shaded areas from 2010 to 2050. Now, you don't need me to tell you that between 2011 and 2050, the world population is expected to increase from 7 to 9.3 billion people, although many now believe it could be more than that. But at the same time, the population living in urban areas is projected to gain 2.6 billion. Thus, the urban areas of the world are expected to absorb all the population growth expected over the next 40 years, whilst at the same time drawing in some of the rural population as well. Furthermore, most of the population growth expected in urban areas will be concentrated in the cities and towns of the less developed regions. And population growth is therefore largely becoming an urban phenomenon, concentrated in the developing world. And more than half the people in the world will soon live in urban environments as opposed to rural ones, where chances are they will have better access to work, but limited or no access to land and livestock to produce their own food, which has been the model of food production in the past. There is therefore a huge consumer-driven demand for increased amounts of affordable, processed or semi-processed food that is safe to eat. And we as farmers respond to that market demand, and in doing so over the years, European farmers have had to fit into an increasingly complex food chain. As primary producers, UK and European farmers have complex relationships with consumers through processing and marketing companies. The links in the chain are maintained by middlemen, transport companies, finance groups, and all of these people claim a stake in the value chain. Whilst these complex food chains can provide benefits and stability, they also bring an increasing level of cost pressure as well, and farmers have little control over the final retail price, as we've heard this morning, of their product, and have fewer options to protect themselves from increased input costs. Another risk, of course, is the consumer becomes detached or disengaged about where their food comes from. And the more complex the food chain, the greater potential for the lack of accountability. And we've seen how problems in the red meat sector cause serious concern of late. There are also political issues which cause huge problems in the supply chain. And again, we heard about the Russian trade ban. And as food chains get wider and more convoluted, they become more vulnerable to wider global politics and complexities. Consumption of meat, for example, has changed over the last 4 decades, and as national incomes have risen. This trend suggests that significant increases could occur in some countries as their income rises further in the future. Increasing scarcity of natural resource such as land and water, paired with the effects of climate, have constrained food production potential in some parts, demonstrated by the incursion and spread of new animal diseases. And it follows, as there is relatively little new land for agriculture, more food needs to be produced. And achieving sustainability is critical. Therefore, sustainability intensification must be a priority. Sustainable intensification means simultaneously raising yields, increasing the efficiency with which inputs are used, and reducing the negative environmental effects of food production. As farmers and food producers, we hear much debate about how we should farm and produce food, and much of this detracts from the real challenge of feeding the world in a sustainable way. There are strong opinions on both sides of the extensive versus intensive debate, And what I'm trying to illustrate here is that with good management, extensive or intensive can work and be profitable for the farmer, as well as providing good animal welfare and health. Of course, there are very big differences in production and land use, but the management and stockmanship is of an appropriate quality. Market demand can be met sustainably with good welfare. But the very best stockmanship and animal care will not prevent an animal getting sick from time to time. And if an animal becomes ill, it must be treated. The use of antibiotics should not replace good farm management and animal husbandry systems. And relying on antibiotics to prop up any husbandry system is entirely unsustainable and does not represent responsible use. But resistant genes don't kill. It's infection which kills. And when dealing with animals or people, the best place to start is in keeping them healthy. And prevention of disease through good animal husbandry and biosecurity is a key aspect of reducing the need for antibiotics. As I said, every animal deserves treatment when ill, but the best place to start is always with a healthy animal, well fed, in a good environment. New building design in both dairy and pig units, where we've seen great strides in ventilation and airspace in the last 5 years, is something to look at. And in dairy and in pig units, many buildings are, in fact, at least 40 years old and in badly need of replacement in some cases. In Ireland, I visited some beef finishing units lately and again looked at the new build put up by chuggers, and far more space, far more airflow than the traditional buildings in Ireland. And therefore, reinvestment is badly needed. Farmers need profitable enterprises in order to fund such investments, as we heard this morning. And this needs a change of approach from the current food chain or the dominant players within it. And it would be nice to see some of these pressure groups recognizing that improvements need investment, would it not? The RUMA mantra of as little as possible, as much as necessary, is highly relevant to this discussion. When animals do become ill, they're normally seen by a veterinary surgeon, a highly qualified individual with the experience to diagnose and treat the problem. I have the highest regard for the veterinary profession, and there are some in Europe who would like to remove the ability of a vet to prescribe and dispense. Personally, I think this is an insult to them as a profession and a real threat to farmers in remote areas. And my own vet says on the farm that it is actually a privilege to prescribe, and this is the fundamental view of the highly qualified and trained vets that I come across all the time. So knee-jerk reactions with little proof of concept or reasoning behind them will do little to achieve shared goals and protect against resistance and preserve antibiotics for future generations. I also want to reflect on some of the comments around consumer preferences and systems that get thrown into this debate on a regular basis by NGOs. As I said earlier, farmers respond to markets, and consumers drive that demand that fuels those markets. There is a place for niche markets, of course there is, and whilst it remains niche, it can service a premium value food chain, but we must retain balance. But going back to the One Health concept that I talked about earlier, One Health is about healthy humans, healthy animals, and represents that shared complexity. Policies and guidelines around responsible use are totally in tune with this concept, and knee-jerk reaction policies which prohibit important medicines with no scientific basis, policies which favour niche markets in an unbalanced way, run the risk of merely exporting our food chains to countries with fewer controls. So on my wish list in terms of tools and regulatory framework required to tackle antibiotic resistance would be this. RUMA supports the setting up of voluntary farm-based herd health management planning systems to monitor and manage, measure and prevent health problems in the herd as best practice tool to encourage high health status amongst farm animals. These are not certification schemes or tick-box exercises, but rather tailor-made farm management programs to make sure the farmer knows how much a disease is costing him and to develop an action plan on health management. These are best done, of course, in consultation with the farm vet or other advisor. These should be seen as living systems with regulatory monitoring of progress. I think on this specific point, we believe the voluntary quality schemes are part of the solution, and we should build on their success. We need more scientific innovations and solutions around veterinary medicines. We need faster diagnostics, and we need pen-side diagnostics. We also need effective and safe alternatives to antibiotics and efficacious vaccines to prevent disease in the first place. We want to continue with eradication programs where possible and where cost-effective. We also need to continue with training initiatives and encouraging the development of best practice guidelines across European markets. So I hope you can tell the message RUMA puts out is how crucial and important this topic is to us all as farmers and the supply chain. I'll move on, Chairman, if I may, to the next subject, which is totally different, AHDB and DairyCo. I'll start with AHDB. We've got some big changes afoot here. Peter Kendall, as you know, is now not quite such a new chairman anymore, but still fairly new. The board isn't yet complete. I'm one of the new members on that board. We have a new chief executive, Jane King, which I'm sure you've all heard about, and we've moved into the new building. Now, if this doesn't signal an opportunity for great change, I don't know what does. So I'm first and foremost an AHDB board member, and secondly, chairman of the sector board, which is the official and strategic and advisory board for dairy. The AHDB board has agreed to a rebranding exercise, bringing all sectors under the AHDB brand. This represents the next stage of looking, feeling, and behaving like one organisation. We expect this to be achieved using in-house capability at minimal expense to the levy payer, but it does make sense to do this. There will be an in-depth business strategy review this spring where we will examine what we do, why we're doing it, what has the most impact, delivers greater value to levy payers, duplication, and what other industries are doing, in the industry are doing. And this will be done in consultation with the industry. We need to bring all the sectors closer together now that we are in the same building at Stoneleigh, maximising the value we get from various activities undertaken, and where possible, develop even more efficient and cost-effective ways of operating. AHDB employs some really talented people, highly qualified individuals covering specialist areas, from nutrition to market intelligence. In fact, every critical area of farming. It is all put there with our levy money, there to provide support, information, technical knowledge, and so on. The future long-term prospects for UK agriculture are still very good, and it's important that AHDB to collectively focus on that, which is the long term, however difficult that might be at times. And our ambition is to become a world-leading centre of agricultural excellence, covering both technical and business areas, working across the chain. Turning to DairyCo, or AHDB Dairying, we all know the dairy industry is under huge pressure right now. It's been said this morning, there is very little good news around. And these are tough times, and they are likely to last for some time yet. And we're there to help, and we did, for example, spend the last 2 days of last week putting together a package so that we can help farmers that find themselves in difficulties as far as cash flow is concerned and finance generally. But the future prospects for the dairy industry, as again we've heard this morning, they haven't fundamentally changed, although that is hard to believe when things are so bad. I mean, you've only got to look at the UK population growth forecasted. In fact, we've just looked at global figures. But of course, this doesn't mean that future growth and demand will be a smooth ride. Far from it. And we've been talking about volatility for a number of years now. And as we get closer to world markets, it has now arrived. But I do think, again, it's been mentioned, how surprised people have been at the speed and the sheer drop in the market, and the reasons for that have been covered. Our challenge as an industry is how we manage volatility, and DairyCo does have a role in that. If we don't compete as farmers and win markets here in the UK, in Europe, and further afield, others will take them. That's the stark reality. We are in a growing market, despite the pain of today, but growth requires confidence, investment, efficiency. And when you look at the countries that are forecasted to expand, Germany, Holland, Denmark, Ireland, of course, heard about that, they're all going to be major players. Can we compete with them? And I'd be dismayed if anyone here thinks we can't. Milk production in the EU will continue to move to more favourable areas, and investment in processing will follow that. We know that Ireland planned to increase milk production over the next 10 years, and we know that they are a major challenge because they import into this country. But how do we grow British dairying? It's a difficult question today, but it must be our long-term goal, I would suggest. And as I said, we need to compete and win markets, and to do that we need independent and evidence-based information, we need to be technically proficient, and we need to promote what we do. That's why our R&D and knowledge transfer, our raft of programs at DairyCo, programs sometimes criticised actually as teaching farmers how to farm. That's why they're so important. It was stated at the Oxford conference that we needed to recognise that we're not necessarily the best. Many of our farmers are, of course, but we can't be complacent, and we're in danger of falling behind. The industry as a whole does need to do better. We do need to sharpen our competitiveness. That's the challenge. We need to accept that improved welfare is ongoing, and we're challenged on veterinary medicines as well. But if anybody doubts that we need to raise our game, then we could start discussing endemic disease, calf rearing, lameness, feed conversion, to mention just 4 areas where there is a huge variance within the industry. But what is clear to me is that where dairy farmers engage with DairyCo, they do gain a great deal. So engagement is the key. Our engagement with levy payers is fairly good, but it needs to be better, and we mean to do just that. We don't shout enough about what we do, and I'm going to do that today. There's still a great deal of work that we do which is not credited to us. We intend to address that. But the value we offer to an average million-litre farmer is truly amazing. It really is. For the cost of less than 2 days, private consultant, a 1 million litre farmer has access to everything we do. And efforts have been made of late to do more with progressive dairy farmers. And I attended the first Dairy Leaders Conference in Coventry only a few days after I took office. Feedback from members there was very positive, and we will do more in this area. The Scottish Hub is now operational and available to farmers as a centre of information, a new service put together in close partnership with NFU Scotland and the Scottish Government. And Stuart Martin, who runs the Scottish Hub, is here today, so please talk to Stuart. Accurate and independent market information is extremely important, especially at times like these, and we do that very well. I think market intelligence and comment is an area we need to improve on, and we're now working to do just that. And of course, you can see all this on our website. We are doing some work. We are looking at futures market and hedging, gaining a better understanding, looking at what might be feasible. It's not straightforward, and certainly not like trading grain. Even in the States, the futures market is not well developed. But it could be one tool to combat volatility. Promoting dairy farmers to the consumer is an area I've focused on right from the day of my appointment. We certainly need to do more here, and plans are now in place. We have the work we do with the Dairy Council on nutritional comment and correction, which is very important. We have our own work, which includes This is Dairy Farming, and our work with education. We're involved and contribute to Red Tractor, but we do need to do more. We published a leaflet which was made available to all levy payers soon after I started. A leaflet which gave consumers an explanation of the current pressures in dairy farming and what shoppers can do to help. A leaflet which appealed to them to look for Red Tractor, telling them about dairy farming in the UK. Also to ask the supermarket where they shop what it was doing for British farming. An update of this leaflet is printed now, and a third one with a different layout is about to be looked at. And it's great to see other companies promoting as well. We're now looking at a bigger project which will involve the media in promoting the dairy industry. And we need to involve Red Tractor in that. And Red Tractor is still making good progress with the consumers. Moving them from right to left on this slide is the desired aim. And we need to draw on the influence we have with the media. National papers, radio, and TV contact us regularly. The Times newspaper is currently in contact with us on fully housed herds, for example. And we need to go out and make the case. The industry should not be treating fully housed cows as some dirty secret. I've been to plenty of fully housed cows units where the health and welfare is of the highest order. And we need to talk about that. We need to explain what we do and why we do it. And my final comment, Chairman, is that our close association with influential people in the media, such as Adam Henson, is very good, and that helps enormously. So we're here to help farmers, to show the rest of the world what we can do. Thank you very much indeed.